Namaskar and welcome, dear learners, to today's discussion on diaspora studies today. I'm Professor Shubhangi Vaidya from the School of Interdisciplinary and Trans-Disciplinary Studies at IGNOU, and with me is my colleague Dr. Sadananda Sahoo, an expert in diaspora studies and program coordinator of the Master of Arts program in Migration and Diaspora, which is being offered by the School of Interdisciplinary and Trans-Disciplinary Studies. Human migration is a process that has been taking place throughout history. Human populations have migrated across the world in search of work, education, better life prospects, in some cases freedom from persecution, and various other factors. The term diaspora refers to the dispersion or spread of a people from their original homeland across the world, and has been a source of immense interest for scholars from multiple disciplines, including history, economics, sociology, literature and culture studies, gender studies, and the like. In this context, it will be very, very interesting to discuss the position of diaspora studies in the world of academics today, as well as specifically discuss the issues pertaining to the Indian diaspora. So we are very fortunate that Dr. Sahoo is here with us, who is an expert in the area. And let me right from at the very outset ask him, Dr. Sahoo, please tell us, what do you think is the relevance of diaspora studies as an interdisciplinary area?
Professor Shubhangi, very good to meet here. And this is a very important topic. In fact, I was waiting for this kind of question. And diaspora studies, if you want to analyze, you have to know the concept itself. And the concept itself is evolving over time. If we see 1980s, it was not there. Though it was, applied to religious dispersion and all this in the context of Hebrews and Jews. But academically, for the first time, Gabriel Schaffer popularized it in his, book, Diaspora and International Politics. But during that time, he used this concept mostly for post-migration, and little bit you can say those who are not coming back, means permanently settled population outside their country. But over 20-30 years you can see so many disciplines have come and they have discussed on this concept. Concept evolved because of so many interest from lots of stakeholders, including nation states, NGOs, academics, media. So they have traced the concept to all angles, in fact. So today if we see, diaspora applies to migrant population, it applies to refugee, it applies to host of population who are outside their country of origin. So when you talk about this kind of concept, you can say, they are linked to multiple areas. For example, when you talk about even Jews also, it is very much part of international relation, because Jews are persecuted in many countries, and today, if you consider, Jews are one of the most influential community. They have no more victim, but they are playing, as a victim community. But if you see over time, 1990s played a major role in changing the perception towards diaspora as a concept or a phenomenon. So,
no, that's actually very interesting, because I think the 1980s and 90s were also a time of globalization as a very, very important process. So can we discuss the impact of globalization on diaspora?
Yes. There I always think why 1990s played an important role. You see, that is the time when IT revolution happened. That is the time where time and space lose its importance.
Right.
That is the time when diaspora became popular, resourceful abroad, like Indian, in Silicon Valley, Chinese in, Canada, Australia and all. They were no more, labor class, their victim and all, but rather they are entrepreneur, they are politically significant in many countries. So diaspora became very positive, and that is the time when even organizations like UNDP, they played a major role for change of perception towards migrant and diaspora community. UNDP brought a annual report called Development on the Move.
This is the United Nations Development
Yes,
Program.
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So migration is very much linked with the development. Before that, even today also, we always don't think migration is linked to development. But before 90s, it was a very derogatory term, in fact, as if they are taking away your job, privileges and all this. So migrants across the globe, they are considered inferior, taking away their, natives' job. They are a, kind of burden on the, local economy. But during 1990, you find lots of changes happening across the globe. In fact, another also important development happened in Australia in 1973, when the term multiculturalism came. And that is also again to accommodate different culture, including diaspora, because Australia is encountering lots of conflict before that. So then they adopted this concept multiculturalism, and that became popular even in Canada, other places, and that is how diaspora got an identity. Otherwise, before that, diaspora was looked down and they were thought they should assimilate.
Right.
Instead of having an independent identity, preserving their culture, they are considered to be, they should be assimilated, otherwise they will be hostile to the local culture, economy and all. So when you talk about diaspora studies, it has a multiple angle, and including international relation, economic contribution like entrepreneurship, investment, remittances. And today you see why we consider diaspora important, because of they are successful across the globe. Even the not so successful diaspora, those are going to Gulf and other countries, their contribution is very important for India.
Like you've raised the very, very important issue of remittances. And before we come to that, you also mentioned, the changing context, the ways in which home countries and host countries, the relationships were, changed in a sense because of the whole issue of development. And you also mentioned the role of Indian diaspora. So can we discuss that in a little bit of detail? Because we see that the Indian diaspora is one of the most significant diasporas globally, dating back to even pre-colonial times. So how do we approach the study of such a vast and diverse diaspora, which has seen so many interesting waves of migration? So that would be an interesting
In fact, Indian diaspora considered to be number one today. If you take the statistics, both PIO and current migrant.
That's persons of Indian origin.
Indian origin and the NRI and other new group, which includes even students and workers and all this. So 31 million.
31 million?
Yes, 31 million. Figure, and this is not just present status I'm talking. You all know that India is the number one country in terms of population. Next 30 to 40 years, this number also will grow. So obviously India will have most populous diaspora even outside for next few decades.
Right.
So it has a very big challenge for us also. The way we engage that bring the outcome, whether we should be developed or not, because economic side also we have to explore. If we see historically, diaspora played a very important role. Starting from Gadar movement to independence movement, it played a very important role in nation building.
Right.
After independence also, if you see many key important people, if you see Mahatma Gandhi also returned, Jawaharlal Nehru, Ambedkar, many other people, they have come back to India after long time abroad, and they contributed towards India in every angle, politics, economy. And then 1960s, you see another phase of, NRI. They came back, MS Swaminathan and many other, even many IT, and medical professionals like the Apollo Hospital, Pratap Reddy and many other. They came back and they, entrepreneurial revolution happened in India. So diaspora is a resourceful. It is also playing a soft power role. If you see many countries, almost Indians are there almost in 150 countries, Out of that, around 10 countries, they are significant minority.
Right.
And in some, at least 4 countries, they are actually majority. Mauritius, Trinidad, Tobago, Suriname, Guyana and all this. So this is if you see, this is a huge soft power for India. And this is very important for modern day when, international relation is very challenging. You have people all across the globe who can actually help in, building relationship with the other countries.
These are all very, very important points that you've mentioned, and I was particularly interested in that point about the diaspora in countries like Suriname, Mauritius, etc., which were all a part of really the colonial diaspora, the diaspora that went to these countries as indentured labor. So could you tell our audience a little bit about that phase of history?
Yes.
And, yeah.
If you see indentured labor, the demography was different. It was mostly, if you see, labor class.
Right.
That is also sometimes called as indentured labor or labor diaspora.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So those times they struggled, they got, settled in other country. So the population also very different. The composition of women, the composition, caste composition, class composition, completely different. And they are almost like slave, with all contract and everything. They didn't have freedom. But over time they struggled, built their future, built the country's future, and today you see they are different.
Exactly.
They are even better than Indian counterparts here. So, and politically they played a very significant role. Even today you see Rishi Sunak, Kamala Harris, they are from those indentured diaspora, many of them. And they play a very important role in advanced countries like USA, UK. So this is what, the huge upward mobility you can see in economic side also, political side and cultural side also. Culturally, they are very vibrant.
So you mentioned culture. I think it would be very interesting to know what kind of links that these diasporic communities have with the home culture, the native culture, in terms of, observance of festivals, rituals, and so on and so forth. Because we see a lot of, attraction or a lot of attachment to the native culture, even amongst diasporic populations. And we read that a lot in literature. We see that a lot in their daily practices and so on. So in terms of retaining their links with the home country through culture, through language, through music, through food habits, this is something very, very interesting from a social science perspective. Would you like to?
Yes, if you see the soft power diplomacy, already I told, but there is also economic side to that. Their culture consumer, okay? And if you see Indian culture becoming globalized, Bollywood becoming globalized, our food habits are becoming globalized. You can find samosas across the globe now, dosas across the globe now. So this thanks to our diaspora. And they preserve culture, not only they preserve, they also popularize. And this kind of thing is very important for, globalization.
Right.
And you go to any country, even culture is not static also. It always enrich with when it come in contact with the native culture. You find creolization, hybridization, you find chutney music. So these are new experiment when Indian music, Indian kind of art and culture intermingle with the native in Africa and other places. So there is lots of new experiments in culture field, in literature field, all happening. And if you see English literature also enriched by diaspora.
Right.
Last few decades you can find all the major, literature Nobel laureates. They are African diaspora, they are Indian diaspora. So they have contributed immensely in every field. Say it, film, say it literature, culinary, music, in every angle. So they have actually created a very positive side of globalization, where two cultures they coexist and they accept each other and enrich also.
It's very, very interesting. One sort of set of migrants who have become very important, and practically you would find in many, many families these days, a lot of students, a lot of young people are going abroad to study or to in search of higher education. So what kind of impact does this have on, say, the Indian economy, the concept of brain drain? Because these are very, very important contemporary issues that are being discussed.
In fact, when we see economic side of migration, we cannot stop it.
Right.
Because people will, anyway they go. Even advanced countries like UK and Australia and many countries who are actually advanced, they are also experiencing migration. Because within that, some segment they will be more globalized. They have skills which are in demand in other countries. So they will be mobile. And Indian population, we have a huge unemployment, traditionally also, even current time also. And our economy cannot absorb them. So obviously they will migrate for a better opportunity, and that is how some strategies there. If you go as a student, you get better opportunity. Not only because you get better education and subsequently you get a better opportunity.
But Dr. Sahoo, there's also a very sinister side to this, that, a lot of people are lured with the idea of migration and better prospects, but in fact they fall victim to touts, they become victims of trafficking, and human trafficking is a very, very serious contemporary problem. So would you like to discuss a little bit about that?
In fact, that is the negative side of every migration. We have to, that's why we need migration governance.
Right.
That's why we need kind of very good international legal procedures, and through bilateral relation, through multilateral relation, and that's why if you see now, last 2-3 years, there is a concept called Global Compact for Migration, which is a overarching, legal, non-binding legal framework to make country to facilitate migration, safe migration, and more orderly migration. And that is what happening, and it has 23 objectives, which includes a range of topics like safe migration, human rights, then gender issues and all this. So slowly, many countries are agreeing upon. I think there are more than 150 countries signatory to it. So migration is understood that is very important, unavoidable. So we need to facilitate for mutual benefit. So in fact, human rights is always a problem, even during colonial time also. Within the community also human rights violation is there. Within host country also there are violations. So that is always there, that is the negative side. And that's why we need to have better migration governance.
So a strong migration governance, particularly for those migrants who may be less educated or may be less aware of the legal ramifications of their migration. Dr. Sahoo, you mentioned a very important element, and that is the gender perspective. And so I think this is a huge area of discussion and intervention. So could you highlight some of the major issues with regard to gender and migration?
Yes. In fact, last question you asked about student migration. In fact, when you talk about gender migration, if in the Indian context, colonial diaspora has a very less proportionate of female migration. Because many of them, that time even male going abroad was considered something, they lose their religion and everything, Kalapani. So female going abroad was something more unthinkable.
Yeah, right.
And that time who are going, mainly the people who they lost their husband, or kind of destitute, beggars and all those. So those composition have changed today. You find more independent, already high-skilled people. They don't need anybody's support to go abroad. They are going independently as student, was
workers.
jobs workers, even the low-skilled workers. You see you'll be surprised the workers who are going large number, they are not software engineer or medical, high skilled workers. They are nurses,
right,
care workers. This is the large chunk of migrant going, and it will increase actually in the future. So when you talk about women workers, this is the segment is very important.
But this is also the segment, the care workers and, people who go maybe as domestic help or nannies or, caregivers for children, the aged, etc. They are also a section that is most liable to be exploited and who are extremely vulnerable. So what would you have to say in this regard?
That is how I gave example of Global Compact for Migration. And increasingly, there is a consensus developing and stakeholders are coming together. Like this is not the case, we can only blame government. This is the case which even the migrant themselves have to be blamed. Sometimes they, because of lure of job and all, they go easy way and they don't follow any procedure. We need to, bring all stakeholders, including the recruiter, the NGOs, diaspora organization and all this, and increasingly this is happening. Though exploitation is happening, but this is also happening. That is how I am saying that the Global Compact for Migration is gaining its momentum now. And this section, which are more vulnerable, as you mentioned, the semi-literate, semi-skilled and care workers type, they are more, and Indian government, in fact, there is a term called ECR, immigration
check required.
So that is one way creating some kinds of check and balance. But it is not a good thing for migration sometimes, because you have to compete with Philippines migrant, other country migrants. So then ECR prohibit you to migrate before certain age. So these are some, many sides of the thing. But obviously they are prone to, exploitation,
yes.
other kind of human rights violation. But India also experiencing this kind of migration last 30 years or so. And slowly various, mechanisms are in place. For example, Kerala state government, which actually experienced this little before compared to many other states, they have many things in place. In fact, we should all, take their experience and implement to, other states like Bihar and UP, Orissa, where the migrants are little recent. Okay, so there are certain, check and balance involving government machinery and NGOs, diaspora organization. So it is happening.
So basically there's a very urgent need for all these agencies which are involved in the process of migration to educate, to empower, to give the basic information and the basic do the basic diligence with regard to female migrants particularly and illiterate ones
Yes.
most importantly. Another category of migrants which has become very, very significant given the kind of global political situation is refugees and those who are leaving their countries for various political reasons or reasons of persecution, conflict, etc. And also a new category of migrants who are displaced due to climate change. So could we talk a little bit about these?
Yes, unfortunately, as globalization happening, people are becoming modernized. We find parallelly this section also growing. The forced migrant. We use this term for a host of, a migrant who are refugee, who are asylum seeker, who are forced to climate this thing. So they are forced migrant. So this section is growing in last 20-30 years because climate related disasters are frequent now. War also, if you see Syrian conflict, then Afghanistan, then recently Russia, Ukraine, and many other places where civil war is happening. So lots of, forced migration is happening, and they are the most victim because they are not accepted anywhere. And they don't have that skill set where, you can use immediately in economy. You don't know who is having what skill and they are being suspicious also. So many factors, and this is the most vulnerable section. And I think we need urgent action. But unfortunately, this section is neglected. For example, in India, we have so many refugees, but we also consider them differentially. because for our geopolitical and other reasons. Every country is like that.
Absolutely.
If you see Ukraine, Ukraine refugees are welcome in European country, but African refugees are not welcome in same way.
There are certain very interesting, I think, larger processes at work here. For instance, racial prejudices, ethnic prejudices, and so on. So these are extremely difficult, not just human rights, but also very, very, big human problems where people are actually suffering. And I think there needs to be a lot more awareness, a lot more policy to rehabilitate, to ensure that a good quality of life is available for all. And often the biggest sufferers are women and children who are really, always the ones who suffer the most in these kinds of situations. Let us talk a little bit, Dr. Sahoo, about contemporary challenges with regard to migration and diaspora. So what are some of the important, I'm asking this question specifically because the world has just come out through this huge pandemic situation, and I think the COVID pandemic has created a lot of issues and a lot of challenges, particularly with regard to migration and diaspora. So would you like to talk a little bit about that?
In fact, I'll add one term, contemporary challenges and opportunity also. Because challenge will come anyway, but opportunity also have to see, otherwise there is no solution. So contemporary challenges, in fact, if you see, there are many such. You already mentioned climate issue, you mentioned the refugee crisis is growing. These are also contemporary challenges. Increasing, female migration is a big issue. India's case, especially if you take, we have a bigger challenge also because our population is huge now. Where to take, in the sense, skill mismatch is a big challenge. You cannot send the traditional countries, same migrant anymore. You see, many countries are high-tech now. You see, the same person 10 years back in Gulf, now same job is not there. So these are all so many, it is some complex, migration policy now is very dynamic. Every day things are changing. Unlike earlier, policies are 10 years, stable. Now every incident can change your policy overnight. COVID, for example, then some war, then some kinds of epidemics and many factors, technological change and so many, geopolitics. Every incident can change the migration policy overnight. So these are the challenge, how to make your policy sustainable and stable also.
Well, I think we've had a very interesting discussion about the various dimensions, challenges, opportunities in the area of diaspora studies. So now would you like to talk a little bit about the specific program that IGNOU is offering, which is the Master of Arts in Diaspora and in Migration and Diaspora?
In fact, Professor Shubhangi, our program is very forward-looking. We designed the program taking input from stakeholders, from industry, from government, from academics, and various aspects are incorporated. You talked about human rights, it is there. We have 3 courses dedicated for human rights issue, human trafficking and other issue. We have courses related to international relation. We have courses related to Indian diaspora specifically. And surprised to know India has many diaspora within country.
Yes.
So we have a course on that also. We have, to balance, you have to see in a very comparative perspective what kind of policy we are doing for diaspora so that we can expect our diaspora get better, policy. So this program is very, covering many aspects which are again interdisciplinary. We cannot deal from sociology or economic side alone, but it has a component from culture, literature, public policy and many areas. So we have a very balanced program, 80 credit program covering all aspects, coming from theory to practical, from methodology, international relation, all aspects. I will be very happy if you can go to our website and browse. The details are there.
So I think for learners who may be interested in this program, do browse the details about this program at the IGNOU website, www.ignou.ac.in. And I think with that, we wind up our discussion. Thank you so much, Dr. Sahoo. It was really interesting and absorbing. And I don't know how half an hour has just gone, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor.